Hey everyone, it's Professor Clark, and we are going to do a quick overview of participles in general in this lecture. I know there has been a fairly large amount of info dumping, and so I thought I would sum it up in a quick lecture on just participles in general. So let's jump into it. Let's start off by talking about the different types of verbs that you can use with the different types of participles, or the different types of verbs you can use to make different types of participles. So if you look at this chart here on slide 2 of the PowerPoint, you can see that present active participles take imperfective, transitive, and intransitive verbs. So examples would be things like czytajushi, piszushi, zanimajushi, uczasi, idushi. So czytać is an imperfective transitive verb, pisać is an imperfective transitive verb, zanimaca is an imperfective intransitive verb, uczyć is an imperfective intransitive verb, and iti is an imperfective intransitive verb. Past active participles are the most flexible or can use the most different types of verbs. You can make past active participles out of both perfective and imperfective, transitive and intransitive verbs. Some examples being czytawszy, przeczytawszy, zanimawszy się, szedłszy, przeszedłszy, uczywszy się, wyuczywszy. So we have this whole gamut here of perfective, imperfective, transitive, and intransitive verbs here. Passive participles can only be made from transitive verbs. So present passive participles have to be made from imperfective transitive verbs, examples being lubimy, uważajemy, nie zabywajemy, nie skłaniajemy. Nieulowimy, uncatchable or elusive, is an exception because that is made from a perfective verb, but other than that, they're made from imperfective transitive verbs. And then past passive participles have to be made from perfective transitive verbs. So napisany, przeczytany, zdzielany, kupiony, zabity, odkryty, начатый are all examples of past passive participles made from perfective transitive verbs. Then on slide 3 of the PowerPoint, we have a chart showing how we form the different participles. So for present active participles, remember we find the ani form of an imperfective verb. We drop the final ta, we add sha with an adjectival ending, and we get things like znajushi, zanimajushi się, spiashi, говорящий, учащийся. So for past active participles, we're going to find the masculine past tense. If it ends in an L, we're going to drop that L, and if what we end up with then is a vowel, we're going to add v, sh, plus an adjectival ending to that vowel. So for example, przeczytać becomes przeczytal. We drop that L, we get przeczyta, and we add wszy to get przeczytawszy. If, however, the masculine past tense ends in a consonant, for example, pomóc und pomógł, we're just going to add sh plus the adjectival ending. So we get pomógł, pomógłszy. And some examples are napisawszy, czytawszy, ispiokszy, liokszy, nasiedszy, and przesiedszy. For present passive participles, those are very easy. We find the my form and we add adjectival endings. So we get lubimy, uważajemy, nie zabywajemy, nie skłaniajemy. And then finally, we have past passive participles, which are definitely the most complicated. There are 3 types, remember. So the first type is first conjugation verbs with it, chat, niat, and some żat verbs. And those are just going to add adjectival endings to the te at the end of the infinitive. So rozbity, zabity. All the other at verbs are going to replace that te at the end of the infinitive with nn and adjectival endings. And so we get napisany or uslyšený. And then the final group, we have these st, sti, zti, iti, and ch verbs. And then second conjugation it verbs. And those are the ones where we have the yenly, yonly formation. So ukradzieny, kupiony. And then finally, here is a chart on slide 4 of the PowerPoint of stress in participles, which is always complicated. Stress is always an issue in Russian, and it is a particularly fraught issue with participles. So for present active participles, The first conjugation verbs are going to take the stress of the они form. So писать, они пишут, пишущие. Скакать, to ride or gallop, becomes они скачут, скачущие. Second conjugation verbs take the stress of the infinitive. So учиться, они учатся, учащиеся. Находиться, они находятся, находящиеся. However, there are a couple of really important exceptions. Любить, они любят, любящий. It takes the stress of the они form. The same thing with терпеть, to tolerate or stand or put up with. Они терпят, терпящий. And then past active participles are really straightforward. They just have the same stress as the infinitive, including in chat and нять verbs. So начать, начавший, начаться, начавшийся, занять, занявший. Present passive participles also have the same stress as the infinitive, so that makes it really easy. Любить, любимый, носить, носимый, обходить, необходимый, терпеть, терпимый. And then where it gets complicated, of course, as always, is with the past passive participles. Of course, these are the most commonly used forms, and therefore they're the most complicated. So нять and чат verbs will have the same stress as the past tense. So занят, занята, занятый, начат, начата, начатый. Other te form participles will have the same stress as the infinitive. So открытый, закрытый, разбитый, so on and so forth. Unverbs will have the stress on the stem if they are stem stressed. So сделать stays сделанный, but the stress will shift to the left or forward towards the beginning of the verb if it is on at in the infinitive. So прочитать, прочитанный. And then yin, yon verbs will have the same stress as the feminine past tense for first conjugation, for example, украденный, and the same stress as the ты form for second conjugation, so купленный. However, of course, there are a couple of exceptions, the big ones being найденный and влюбленный. So that is it. That is your overview of participles. I'm sure you're finding that that is a lot of information. Remember, just take it in little pieces, learn what you can in each little section. And the most important thing is to be able to recognize these forms and understand them. You do not normally have to produce them actively in sort of beginning or intermediate level Russian. But you do need to be able to understand them if you're going to be able to do any reading. So there's that. Next, we will move on to verbal adverbs. So we get to say goodbye to participles and move on to something that's not quite as exciting, but also very exciting and interesting.